And we're back at it. Yeah. Got us a New Holland L555 Deluxe. And the only thing that makes it deluxe is it has auxiliaries. Deluxe. Well, I guess it's got an in-cab heater too. That little squirrel cage back there. Yeah, just picked this guy up. Finished the 743. It turned out nice. I didn't make a video of it completed. I will probably do that before I sell it. But yeah, got this pig in here. A little bit different than the Bobcat. And the New Hollands, especially this era, they got the axial lift. I think it's how they refer to it, which essentially it's just the geometry of the boom allows pretend that you drop a pendulum from any point of the bucket and it's going to stay in the same path as it goes up, whereas a radial lift, which is like the last skid steer, just goes up in a radius. So I mean, I don't know the pros and cons, to be honest, but they have, each of them has a benefit. But the problem with this one is it makes working on it a pain in the butt. And I didn't videotape it because I didn't want everyone to laugh, but it was interesting. Had to get my engine hoist, hook it around this back cross member of the boom to lift it up. In order to get it to lift up, though, I had to pop a hydraulic line on the so imagine that the piston's down here. It's trying, as I'm trying to lift the boom up, it's trying to compress all the fluid that's in here. So you want to release the fitting that would be on that pressure side so that the fluid has somewhere to go. So made a little bit of a mess. I was able to catch some of it in my bucket, which is down there. But yeah, so I was able to get it off so I can get the engine hood off, because you cannot take that off with the boom down. So I had to get the boom all the way up. It was a nightmare. I had to end up cutting off the tabs. I'll re-weld those back on, but there's just two little kind of spacers that allow, I'll show you right here, these guys. So I just cut those off and I was able to take off the hood. So yeah, I'm getting there. The issue with this one is I've never seen it before. I will be curious to see what's going on. But when you go to crank it, it shoots out coolant like no other. I mean, it was a geyser. I've never seen anything like that. I've seen some bubbling, but for it to shoot it out 3 feet out of the radiator cap, it's pretty impressive. And yeah, so I got a new head on order. Don't do what I do and assume. I'm assuming, just using kind of deductive reasoning, and I assume that's what it is. I might be right, might be wrong. The new head's on its way, so it's gonna take a week or two. So I ordered that. And yeah, so kind of like the last Bobcat, this is basically from the same family engine, just a little bit bigger. This is a V1902, so it's a 1.9 liter 4-cylinder diesel, indirect injection. So I started the cab heater hoses, so I took those off. Got the valve cover off. I got the injector lines pulled off. And then I got the rocker assembly pulled off. So I'm getting there. I got to take the intake hose off. It's probably going to be easier to remove the muffler as well. So get those bolts out of the way. And I'll have to remove the fuel return line, which is on the back side over there. I'll have to remove that. And let's see, as we remember, gotta take that coolant hose off, which is the recirc from the water pump, and alternator. I gotta take off that bracket right there. So outside of that, she'll be ready to, oh, and of course all the head bolts, those gotta come off. But yeah, I'm recording on a pretty low battery, so I'll probably pick this up tomorrow, but at least wanted to get a quick introduction. And yeah, I think, well, it's too late now, but I'm gonna try to get a tripod at some point. I said that last videos, but I accidentally hit stop. I said that last video, and here I am, no tripod still with my hands. So we're still learning. I'm hoping that these are informative, instructive. You know, listen to me, don't listen to me, whatever. I hope at least my hope is that at least it helps out a little bit. I don't know. So far, things work for me as far as the way I do it. And I always try to think that there's many ways to skin a cat, at least on these things. And the way I've been doing it seems to work. So, yeah, into it. Let's see. The crazy thing, which I don't know, we'll see, but there is no coolant. The oil seems to be sticking pretty well. As far as it was at the full mark when I got it. I tried turning it over, the coolant went crazy, and then it's been sitting for a few days, and then I look back again, the oil's at the same exact spot. So the assumption is that there's a crack in the head, and the crack is allowing combustion gases to make it through that crack into the coolant and then out to the least path of resistance, which would be the open cap. But typically what happens is if there's a crack there, then when the engine's not running or it's not being turned over, the coolant will drip out of that crack, and I'm not seeing any signs of that. So we'll see. We'll get to it. Wife just popped out. And yeah, I'll be back once I get further. Night number 2. Yeah, it's the day after yesterday. At least yesterday's video. Yeah, we got the arms in the air. Kind of crappy video, sorry, on my phone, but involved using the hoist. That wasn't fun. The concept remained the same. Let me just flop your... So, bust that nut. I was doing this side though. That's just closest, but take that nut off. Because again, the cylinders are going to want to push out. So that fluid that's inside of this side of the cylinder needs to go somewhere. So the easiest way is just to relieve it. This is, of course, if you have a running machine. And this one obviously is not. But yeah, so you can lift the arms up using an engine hoist. Just be safe about it because it is a little bit sketchy, or at least it feels like it. I have no idea what these arms weigh, but I gotta say they're at least probably 1,500 pounds. I don't know. That's probably an overshot, maybe an undershot. Don't know. Don't care. I had this on the 2-ton setting, so I wasn't really worrying about it being maxed out. But I guess losing the cylinder head and a few other bits and pieces made all the difference, because when I was first originally trying to lift it off this chain, and that's not for me, that's how it came. When I was trying to lift it off the, when I was trying to lift the boom up, I was actually lifting the back side of the engine up, and I thought it was deadheaded, meaning that the oil wasn't flowing out of that fitting. So I basically took it all the way off, and that wasn't the case. I just came back here and stepped on the eyelet there, and it flopped back down. So it was only a few pounds difference that was keeping it from sitting on the ground and the boom going up. Eventually got it to a point where more weight was starting to transfer back, and it was sitting down on its own. But yeah, regardless, it was really sketchy. At least that's what it felt like. Got the pins in, and thankfully those move really nice, so it's locked in now, and it's not going anywhere. So Yeah, we're asking why am I talking like this so much and all this and that. I've been very on the show because I'm more mad than anything. I got the cylinder head off last night and find anything crazy. I mean, there's a lot of carbon. The hour meter on this thing shows like 5,000 hours, but I feel like either someone's done bushings on this, or if they're the original bushings, then there's no way there's 5,000 because it's fairly tight. Nothing's really slopped out, egged out, whatever. So, yeah, I feel like because you don't turn the machine off with the key, you actually use the hand throttle over there. That guy right there. You pull that all the way backwards, and that shuts the engine off because that's directly connected to the fuel shutoff. But I feel like someone's left the ignition on a couple times, and it just ran up the hour meter. But I'm just telling myself that to make myself feel better. Okay, let me get into it. I'm talking too much. So the reason why I want to pull this engine, I really don't want to, because it doesn't look like it's a fun chore. I don't know. I'm very comfortable with Bobcats. New Holland, this is my first one, so I think once I do it once, it's not a big deal, but it's just new to me. Number 2 cylinder is beat to hell. I mean, there's a hole there in the side of the piston. Surprisingly, the bore looks nice. There isn't a ring or a groove at the top of the cylinder where the pistons don't make contact, or when the rings don't make contact. But yeah, there is some pitting on one of the cylinders. But overall, that number 2 piston is bad. I don't know. It seemed like it had decent compression though, but I don't like the looks of it, so it's coming out. All right, so we're back. New Holland L555 engine removal. This is what it's turning into be. Originally we were looking at head issues, but it was really tough to see where the gasket failed. I think right there is where it failed and was producing or introducing exhaust combustion gases into the coolant. So pulled the head, kind of looked pretty rough. Yeah, but I already got a new head for it anyway, so I don't know. I'm gonna grind it down or wire wheel it down and see how bad it is. But as we said, number 2 is really boogered. Something broke a while back and dinged up the piston. There's a hole right over there if we're looking at it right here, about the 9 o'clock position. Cylinders still have a few thou. I think it was like 4 thousandths of clearance. I am not getting this machine. This is just going to be a beater. So I'm just going to pull it. I got a micrometer hone. I'm going to take a couple thou off and then call it good. But yeah. So the last video you saw, none of this stuff was pulled, like the radiator and oil cooler. So I'll kind of let me back up and show you what I did or what I've done so far to get to this point. So there's 2 bolts that hold the pump to the engine. They're accessible here. You pull the seat out, gonna get a new seat, but we got this room to work with. The 1 bolt is right back in there. It's tough to see. Let me zoom in a little bit. So you see the threads down there, that's one. And the second one is opposite, right there. So I've already backed them out. You can't, at least I couldn't, get a spanner or an open-ended wrench back there. Could not get a socket because there's not much clearance in between the head and the pump. So I got I used a crow's foot. Like I said, they're 3/4 inch bolts. So this side, if you're looking at it, the left-hand side, As you're sitting in the machine, it'd be the right-hand side of the operator. But I got into here, put a crow's foot, you can't really see it, but I put a crow's foot on the bolt back there, then a universal joint and like a 6 or a 12-inch extension. And then I got a breaker bar, and I was able to get a turn out of that. Once I got it loose, I was able to hand unthread it. This side over here, there wasn't any room for me to get the same setup in there, so what I actually had to do was I just attached the crow's foot directly to a ratcheting wrench, and I positioned the ratchet so it was facing like that while it was attached to the bolt. And then there is a freeze plug back there on the engine, right back in there, that I used. I put a pry bar on that lip, and I put the ratchet below the pry bar, and I just pushed down on the pry bar and it broke it loose. So I was able to get a few more turns out of it, reset the crow's foot, do that a couple more times, and then I was able to unthread it by hand. So there's still somewhat in there, but I did not want to go too far until I knew that I can get those cracked, because if you can't get those loose, you got to pull the whole pump. So that involves disconnecting the control levers, hydraulic lines, blah, 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 blah. Gonna make it a little bit more of a chore, possibly easier, but more of a chore. So I didn't want to do that, and this is how I did it my way. So I got that free. Next thing you need to do is, here is the shock absorber for the right-hand drive. So again, we're looking at the left side because we're looking into the machine, but as the operator will sit, this is the right-hand side. That plate gets connected up to the top bolts right there. Those were 17 mil. Kind of weird how we went from a 3/4 to a 17, but that's because the threads, since this is a Kubota, Kubota are Japanese, so they use metric, so they use a 17 mil bolt to get in there. So just pop those free, and now we got this, because that yellow piece right there is going to go with the motor once we pull it out. Got that. So we're finished up through here. Backside. Did some basic stuff, removed the fuel line, removed the throttle linkage right there. As you can see the holes, there's the pin. So I pulled the pin and then pulled it out, and now this guy is loose. See, the fuel pump's gonna stay there. I took the 2 mounting bolts off. I used an impact on those guys. Those were 15/16. So 15/16 wrench on the bottom side and the impact on top. Busted them loose, took them out. They're sitting over there on the hood. Next, I took the radiator and oil cooler out. Break those fittings loose, one on each side. They are 1 1/4 inch. And there's, this one is a spinny guy, and that one is a fixed nut. So just put a 1 1/4 inch wrench on that side, 1 1/4 inch on that side, because if you don't, when you're trying to break this one free, you're going to potentially spin that and you could possibly break it. So you need to make sure you have another wrench on there to keep that stationary while you break this coupler loose. So got those loose. Be prepared. There's going to be some oil that comes out, depending on, I guess, how long the machine's been sitting, where the oil's been draining back to, blah, 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 blah. But, yeah, there's going to be some oil that comes through, but not a big deal. The cooler is independent of the radiator, but they kind of have this, I don't know, whatever you want to call this. But the radiator will slide right into that. But once you get the cooler free, then there are 2 bolts that go into here. Why is it blanking my mind? They're smooth, and then they got the square drive in there, so it fits into that slot, so they can't rotate. But there's a nut on this side on each one. There's two here, 2 over there. And those were 9/16, and those came out fairly easily. So once you get those removed on each side, then this unit will be able to slide up. Okay? Next, the radiator. There's nothing that holds the radiator in place. It's just this guy here. Again, the radiator slides into those slots. But I did the radiator next because it was a little bit easier to get to the lower coolant hose with some room. So just a worm clamp there, unscrewed that, came off fairly easily. There's still going to be some fluid in there because that's a low part. So I don't know, it's maybe about a half gallon that came out that I was able to capture mostly into buckets, but there's still some spillage, but be careful of that. So far what I'm seeing is you do not need to remove the bottom skid plate. I found a online manual I had to pay a few bucks for, but of course the manual did not explain anything about the power unit, aka the engine. All I cared about was hydraulics, the drive system, controls, electrics, all that. Nothing about the motor. So I'm doing this kind of all freehand. And again, there's nothing that I found that shows you how to do this, at least for this machine. So also, I probably should have prefaced in the beginning, this is only for the Kubota because this machine, apparently there's two different engines that were offered for it, one being a Perkins and then the other one being a Kubota V1902. So the Perkins might be fairly similar stuff, but there might be some differences, but this is for the Kubota. Yeah, so if I would have left the cylinder head on if I knew I was going to pull the engine, but again, I thought we were just doing cylinder head work, and it was when I found out that the cylinder head wasn't too bad and it was pistons that were some issues too. This is where I'm at. So there isn't much that you can do to lift the engine. I made, because I've done this in the past where I had to pull the engine and the cylinder head wasn't on there because there are lifting eyes on the cylinder head. I made some blocks. I gotta find where they are. Yeah, I don't know. They're somewhere in my mess of a garage. But all they are is it's a 4x4 that goes across. I have an eye bolt in the center, and then I have a hole on each side of that eye bolt that I've egged out quite a bit, so I have some adjustability. But the 4x4 is just thick enough to give good support while lifting, because this engine's still going to be a few hundred pounds without the cylinder head. But it allows you to use the head bolts because the head bolts are still long enough to go through that 4x4. So I put, depending on how this engine's going to come out, I might use one, I might use two, but I just thread them into I use 2 bolts in the head bolts, and then that will give me 2 lifting points on the deck surface, and I can lift it up. So that is, I think, all caught up. There's still some electrical on this side that I have to get to, like the solenoid. Oh, come on. Hold on. Okay. So I got to deal with the solenoid wire. I'm probably just going to keep the battery cable for the starter on there. Solenoid, and probably this is for power up front. I got that white or yellow wire. That's actually that is a temp sensor. So originally there was a temp sensor that was over here on the cylinder head, but that's the temp sensor that they're using. So it does have a temperature sensor. The other is that electrical wire right there that doesn't have a bolt through it. That's your glow plug. Both of those are 7mm heads, so I just use a 7mm extension or a deep wall socket on a 1/4-inch drive and ripped those off, disconnected that line from the glow plug rack, which would on the cylinder head, and actually now I'm thinking about it, I would have covered this during the cylinder head removal, so never mind. Let's see, I'll have to take off that oil pressure sensor, and just a few miscellaneous wires, but this, as it's sitting right now, I need to get those 2 bolts that are connecting the pump, pull those out. This motor should be able to come out. Let's see if I can shake it. See how heavy it really is. Okay, it's pretty heavy. But yeah, I should be able to get it out. I gotta get my engine hoist set up. Probably have to open up the garage for this because there's not much distance here for the legs to come down. But yeah, I'm gonna follow back up here in a little bit once we kind of get everything rocking and rolling. But this is how you pull the engine. We in. All right, back getting to pull the engine. So this is where we're at. So the pump, the back side, since that's facing the rear of the engine or of the machine, floats, and the only support it has is from those 2 bolts on each side that we removed. So it's best to get a strap. It was a little bit of a pain to try to snake it underneath the pump, but I got it supported on each side, ratcheted it up, and this provided support so that it doesn't flop down. So then I got my engine hoist in here. This is that little janky block I made, but it works really well. It's just a couple head bolts, big washers, threaded into the block, and so it's at a severe angle right now. But that support allowed me to pull the engine apart. So as you can see, we got it apart. And it wasn't wanting to come apart originally. So that's where I figured out getting those straps, because the bottom of the oil pan, as you can kind of see right there, that blue, was hitting this bar right here. So I'm not sure if this bar is removable or not, but in order for the engine to slip out of the splines on the spline shaft of the hydraulic pump, you kind of had to lift it up a little bit so it's at an angle so it can clear that bar that's down there. So yeah, she is free. I gotta figure out how to finagle this. I should have pushed the machine a little bit more forward because I am maxed out with my garage, and the garage won't open up because it will hit the lift arms. So I'm gonna try moving the machine. Oh, that's some crap there. But machine forward, or at least try to, so that I can try to maneuver the engine out. My crane's a little bit taller, so I had to use a bottle jack to lift the back end of the machine up. So it's not gonna roll right now, of course, but I'm gonna see if I can angle it out by pushing that a little bit backwards and pulling the wheels this way, and then putting the engine right here. But we'll see. I'm hoping to not have to move the machine. Again, this is just a quick and dirty new piston, rings on all 4 cylinders, light hone. Yeah, and we'll be in business. Be right back. Hold your horses. I forgot a couple things. Typically what happens, that's why you go nice and slow when you start pulling the engine. When I started lifting it up, the engine, the back half, kept pulling down like it was stuck in space. Come to find out, I didn't see it because it's pretty dirty, but that bolt right there, what did I use? 11/16. I think it's a metric, but the 11/16 worked. It was pretty tight on there. But yeah, ground strap, forgot to do that. So take off your ground, and I also took the alternator off. Instead of taking off all those wires, I just removed that one bolt, slid it off the bracket, and yeah, so that's it. I mean, there were a couple of connections on the starter, like the relay switch and main power cable, which gets connected to the power cable of the starter. But yeah, now she's ready to go. So I'm gonna get it lifted up out of here. Yep. She's back in. Just got the motor set into place. I gotta align. Actually, that bolt hole looks good, so I gotta throw some bolts in there. Engine's still pretty dirty, and I clean that up once I get the machine running. But the engine, I put it back together. New pistons, rings, rod bearings, and she's running like a top. So, yeah, the cylinders were within spec, so I was actually able to hone those out, and that turned out pretty good. I didn't show you that process. I don't know, I feel like there's a million honing videos out there that you can watch. maybe in the future, if anyone even starts watching these things or not and request it, I'll start doing it. But nonetheless, I also didn't video the engine going in because it's just reverse. And to be honest, again, I don't really have the means of setting up my camera just yet. Haven't gotten there of purchasing a tripod, but there's a lot of back and forth, and it would have just been frustrating to keep moving the camera around. But essentially, kind of came at an angle a little bit, and I like to use the ratchet straps because you can kind of adjust them a little bit, and give you some, you know, easier, or I guess more slight adjustments when you're trying to align it. But it's just a spline shaft that connects to the hydraulic pumps. So just kind of like had to go back and forth between the back of the engine to the front of the cab to make sure that I was making sure that the splines on the pumps and the spline on the engine were in line with each other. They were. Eventually I was able to kind of push it back and forth, and eventually it slid on there. So I put some like anti-seize on the thread, or excuse me, on the splines, just to make sure it goes together easier and doesn't get stuck in the future. But yeah, so I got a mess of wires and hoses I got to hook up. But yeah, if I had more time today, I could probably be driving it in the next 2 hours, but I don't. So I'm just gonna button up a few more things, and then I promise I'll get a video when it's all put back together. I gotta remember not to send the boom into the ceiling. I've done that in my last house. Whoops. But I don't know if they'll touch it or not. It's pretty close. I mean, there's definitely some more travel on the cylinders, so I don't know. It'd be close, but yeah, engine runs, all that. It actually, originally, I kind of forgot what I said, but I thought the cylinder head was cracked, and after inspecting it, I couldn't find a crack on the cylinder head. I did find, but I already threw it away, a failed head gasket. So yeah, I was able to just resurface the head and threw it on there, and it works. I mean, jury's still out. I got to fill it up with coolant because I still have a brand new cylinder head in a box that I prematurely ordered. Thankfully, there's a return on it. If not, then I'm sitting on a head, so whatever. Yeah, let me get working on this. I'll probably bring you back in the next day or two when I get close to firing it up. She's alive. Yeah. Pretty easy. And she runs great. Yeah. Not much more to say about that. Put some new lights in it. They weren't working, and go figure, they just needed a light bulb replacement. Put LEDs in there. Put a new blower fan, and I think it's nice and toasty. Outside of that, she rips. Ugly, needs a paint job. Not sure I'm gonna do that or not, but she'll be heading out soon.